The Detroit Lions are facing a historic number of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Not only are a majority of their starters from week one injured, but now a majority of the backups in the depth have ailments as well. And as such, the Detroit Lions have been forced to make a couple of signings, sign a couple of veterans, and hopefully bring in a little bit of help on the defensive side of the ball. And today, we're going to talk about those signings, the signings of Jamal Adams, Quan Alexander, and Jonah Williams, and what they could potentially mean for the Detroit Lions defense, as well as the potential role they may play as they join a Lions defense who statistically is very strong, but depth wise is becoming increasingly thinner. So, with that being said, let's start off with the obvious, right? The Detroit Lions are going to see some roster changes over the next couple of weeks, with players being waived, players being placed on IR, and the Detroit Lions signing some veterans. This roster looks different than it did even back on Thanksgiving a few days ago, and we're going to take a look at just how it's changed. As mentioned before, the Detroit Lions now have 18 players on injury reserve, a majority of them being starting caliber players or at the very least playmakers that had roles within the offense and defense. The most recent additions, Khalif Raymond, the Detroit Lions Pro Bowl caliber punt returner, Malcolm Rodriguez, the Detroit Lions starting linebacker, as well as Mekhi Wingo, a standout rookie performer who, despite statistically not being very good, has been quite impactful in the pass rush over the last several weeks and has been a nice and pleasant surprise from the sixth round selection that he was back in April. With the placement of those players on injury reserve, the Detroit Lions have also signed some players. Of course, former Pro Bowl linebacker Quan Alexander has been signed from the Denver Broncos practice squad to the Detroit Lions active roster. Safety Jamal Adams has been taken from free agency, most recently of the Tennessee Titans, and been signed to the Detroit Lions practice squad with the expectations that he will be elevated within the coming weeks, as well as the Detroit Lions signing defensive lineman Jonah Williams from the LA Rams practice squad to the active roster of Detroit. So today we're going to take a look at these three players, take a look at what they bring to the defense, and overall take a look at what their impact may be within the next couple of weeks, as they are likely going to be thrust into playing time and starting roles due to the number and substantial injuries. Quan Alexander, as I mentioned, is a former Pro Bowler. Back in, I believe, the 2019 season, he made the Pro Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he's been around the league. He spent time in Tampa Bay, San Francisco, New Orleans, New York, Pittsburgh, and most recently of Denver, where this season he resides among the practice squad. Now, he has been called up 3 times by the Denver Broncos and participated in 3 contests where he's been pretty good. But on his career, he's been fantastic. 639 tackles, 54 tackles for loss, 31 quarterback hits, 13 and a half sacks, 13 forced fumbles, 6 fumble recoveries, 9 interceptions, and 34 passes defended. Quan Alexander has been one of the more underrated linebackers for quite a while within the NFL. And even though it never seems as though he's a priority free agent, even though it never seems like he's a guy that is going to be thrust upon and is going to be put into a starting role within a defense, he always ends up playing. He always ends up starting, right? He always starts the season as a free agent, always starts the season on a practice squad as of the last couple of years, and always seems to end up in a starting role, always seems to be put in a position to make plays. And up through this point in his career, he's still making plays even on the Denver Broncos roster. This season, he hasn't played very much. As I said, 3 games he's been called up, but he's made 8 tackles in those games with a forced fumble and a fumble recovery in 2 separate games. So he's forced a turnover in 2 of the 3 games he's been in and had 8 tackles, which isn't fantastic, but is pretty good, all things considered, from a 30-year-old linebacker who isn't playing significant snaps. He now joins a linebacking core of Jack Campbell, the former first-round pick from Iowa, as well as Trevor Nowaske, a player the Lions got off of waivers back in Week 4, and Benjamin Neiman, who did start the season on the active roster, but was expected to be nothing more than a special teams ace in the linebacker 6 on this team. Quan Alexander is probably the Lions' second most talented linebacker, and I think will slide in a little bit as to where Malcolm Rodriguez is leaving a gap, right? Jack Campbell will still take a majority of the snaps. Trevor Nowaske will still play a lot at the Sam linebacker position, but I do think Quan Alexander can come in and be a pretty good option for the Detroit Lions, along with Jamal Adams, who we will get to talking about in just a couple of minutes. But before that, let's take a look at the defensive line signing the Lions made in Jonah Williams. The 4-year NFL veteran has spent time with both the Los Angeles Rams and the Minnesota Vikings, but as of the 2024 season, he actually spent time with both. Currently residing on the Los Angeles Rams practice squad, Jonah Williams has 2.5 career sacks, 80 career tackles, 5 TFLs, and 9 quarterback hits. And while he's not going to come in and be an immediate starter, he's not going to come in and be an immediate impact player on this defensive line. With the losses of Levi Onwuzurike for a couple of weeks, with the loss of Josh Paschal for a number of weeks, and of course the loss of Mekhi Wingo, the Lions are shorthanded at the defensive tackle and defensive line positions. So a veteran player who has career sacks, who's put up some decent numbers over his 4-year career, coming in to make an impact. I don't think he'll play a large number of snaps, but I do think he'll get a healthy rotation throughout the next couple of weeks, either to be a run stopper or just because of the pure lack of depth. And I do think that he will be impactful, but I don't think he'll be necessarily the starter that Jamal Williams or Quan Alexander will be. With that being said, let's get on to Jamal Adams, right? The 8-year veteran, the 3-time Pro Bowler, the former All Pro who just 4 seasons ago was looked at as one of the best safeties in the NFL. He was a former top 5 selection from LSU, and he spent a lot of time around the NFL, 3 years in New York, 4 years in Seattle, and most recently had a 3-game stint in Tennessee before he was released from the Titans. Now, the Titans do not have a good defense, right? Statistically, scoring wise, they do have a very good defense, but overall, they really aren't that strong of a unit. And Jamal Adams really didn't fit what they were looking for. So they released him after just 3 games. But I don't think that that necessarily means Jamal Adams won't fit in Detroit. And there's a lot of people saying that he's going to play safety. A lot of people saying he might play some linebacker. A lot of people saying that he might play somewhere in the slot or have a versatile role. And while I don't necessarily think they're going to hand the keys to Jamal Adams and say, let's put you in a lot of different positions, I do think keeping him around the line of scrimmage and playing him at more of a linebacker role could work for the Detroit Lions. And I think that this is a move more out of being desperate than it is for Jamal Adams truly fitting what this locker room needs. But at the same time, this is a player that was formerly a team captain at LSU. I believe the first true freshman to be a team captain. So the leadership qualities have been there in the past. He is a player that has put up great numbers in his career. And I do think that this is still a pretty quality player to have around. Jamal Adams on his career has almost 500 career tackles, has 50 TFLs, 42 quarterback hits, 21 and a half sacks, 7 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, and 4 takeaways through the air. And while his role hasn't been very significant in 2024, I do think if the Lions put him in a role where he's close to the line of scrimmage, he's around the football, he's allowed to just chase and tackle and be a physical hitter and blitz the quarterback, I think he could still be a pretty good player for this Lions defense. In kind of a mixed role between what the Lions had Ifeatu Melifonwu and Jalen Reeves-Maybin doing a season ago. He's not going to play every down. He's not going to play every snap of defense. But in maybe obvious rushing situations, they put him in to chase, run, and tackle. In blitzing situations, they bring him in to go after the quarterback. And while you're never going to drop him into deep coverage because he's not that good of a coverage safety, you're not going to drop him into coverage a whole lot. You're not going to have him man-to-man versus a running back 30 to 40 yards down the field. But if you play him at linebacker, you kind of showcase his ability to chase and tackle. You showcase his ability, right? You kind of put on display everything he does do well for a defense and maximize that quality, maximize that potential. And again, while I don't think this is necessarily a move the Lions wanted to make, I don't necessarily believe that Jamal Adams is the best fit for Detroit. I do think there are worse fits. I do think doing nothing would have been a worse option. And again, there is still talent. There is still ability there. And even if he's not going to be a strong safety, this is a player that could potentially slide into the slot. This is a player that could potentially be a linebacker, and an absolute pinch could potentially be a safety. So there's versatility there. There is still talent there. And I do think this is a good move for the Detroit Lions, despite probably not being the ideal move for the Detroit Lions. But they had the All Pro. They had the former Pro Bowler, and they had actually a couple of former Pro Bowlers to likely help out in the linebacking core with their injuries that they have suffered. And with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Just kind of an update on the players the Lions are bringing in, what their roles may be on the defense, and what we might expect to see out of these players as they join the Detroit Lions and get ready for Thursday Night Football. I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion on all three players, but with that being said, it's all I got for you guys right now. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you think about Quan Alexander, Jamal Adams, and Jonah Williams, as well as subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. Helps the channel out a ton, and we are hoping for a big month in December. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.